so when you start getting into tax decisions and agreements between parties who are going to be involved in the business, just going in and plopping down saying, I'm going to, spend $600 and have an attorney file it for me. I mean, not only are you paying them a lot of money to do something that's very simple, but you're not getting the instruction that you need on the myriad of issues that are out there. And there's a lot more than just what you're going to see on the surface.
Now, you mentioned before that just a little bit about why an internet entrepreneur needs to create an LLC. Is there anything else you want to mention about that? Because I know that I've had friends that wanted to start it, and I was trying to tell them that they need to do it the right way, and they're saying, oh, I don't need to do all that. What would you say to somebody that's like, I'm just trying to start a little internet eBay business. I don't need all that. What would you say to them?
Well, and that's a real good point, because you have folks that they start out and they say, look, I'm only going to be making, maybe I'm lucky if I make $30,000 a year at this the first year, maybe less. A couple things. We'll first talk about the liability issues. There is liability when you have internet business, without question. There's trademark issues. For example, some people will buy a domain name and they won't search to see if there's actually a trademark, or there could be a mistake in how you did your trademark search, or you may not search in the right criteria. So you may think that the word, the name ABC Internet Services is a reasonable name that doesn't violate trademarks, but it might. And so buying the .com does not mean that you're not violating a trademark. Well, trademark liability is something that if you get sued for and you're just set up as an individual, a sole proprietor, you don't have anything else set up in terms of a business structure, that means that little eBay business or that little business that you put together could risk all your other personal assets. So there is something from the sense of damage control where you want to limit any liability or issues that come about when you're conducting your online business. There's also copyright issues. A lot of people like to take articles or information or facts, if you have an information-type website, and republish that on your own website. Well, that can create copyright issues. You have to be very careful as to how that's done. You need to cite the author. And invariably, you may have a webmaster or someone else who's doing that, and there could be mistakes. And so that's always an issue. There are also problems regarding, as we said, domain names and trademarks, and that is a really big one because a lot of folks just don't do the trademark search correctly or can't afford to have an attorney do that. There's issues with meta tags. For example, you may hire a webmaster that may use some of the meta tag names that are used by some of your competitors or the actual name of your competitor in a meta tag. And I'm going to assume everybody, understands those terms. But all those types of things can create liability from the standpoint of you versus any of your competitors or outside parties. Now, there's more. It really doesn't end there. There's privacy issues. For example, if you collect names on your website and you have a database and somehow it gets hacked, or you decide to do a joint venture with another author or promoter or some party like that, and they give you a list of names to send email blasts to. Well, you may not know whether they've filtered those names correctly or they have worked within some of the anti-spamming regulations, and you may be in a situation where you're involved in a suit because you've wrongly sent emails or spam, or you have violated someone's privacy because a list that you have has been hacked, or there's been some breach of the integrity of your names. Customer testimonials. I've seen this a lot too, where you'll have a customer put a testimonial on your website if you have like a blank type of fill-in form requirement, or you have a testimonial from an email. And you may, the customer may say, your material is a lot better than so-and-so's. I bought it and it was horrible. I get that a lot when I have customers come and say, you know what, I bought this course from somebody, it wasn't any good, yours is a lot better. Well, that can create, a defamation issue. So you have to be careful. You have to understand there's a lot of liability issues from a small internet business. And a lot of these areas are changing. A lot of these areas don't really, the rules are not as established as we might think. But just because it's a website and just because you think, well, I don't have that much traffic or I have a lot of traffic, you can still have issues and you have competitors. And not to talk ad nauseum here, but I'm going to add a couple more things on the liability things. Again, if you don't have a business structure set up and you're just doing business in your own name, then anything that happens as a result of that business, any liability or any losses, that will create liability for you personally. So all of your personal assets for the most part. Now, there's some exceptions to that based on some of the states have exemptions and certain things that in bankruptcy you can keep your house, for example, in Florida. But absent that, most of your other assets are going to be at risk if you're ever sued in a small Internet business. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of people, when they try to do business with a company, they like to see the name LLC or incorporated after the name of the business. Those are things that denote a certain level of prestige, a certain level of respectability, an established business. So there are issues there. Now, let me get into another one here, because when you don't have an entity set up and you don't have anything done formally and you begin to deal with partners or joint venture parties that you're going to do certain promotions with, that can be very dangerous. If you have a partner and decide that you are going to promote a particular website, in that event, the law will consider both of you general partners, and you can be held just as responsible as they are for any activities that they undergo that create liability. For example, I mean, this is a crazy example, but this kind of stuff happens. Let's say, for example, you decide you and your friend are going to promote a website. Both of you guys are driving around, going to local businesses, trying to get some advertising space. While he's driving around, your friend on business, he hits somebody. He has car insurance that's, let's say, totals $500,000 in liability coverage. But the person is really mangled and they sue for $1 million. Well, the car insurance is going to cover $500,000. There's going to be a $500,000 overage. In that event, because both of you were engaged in a business together with the agreement to split profits, then you're considered general partners. And as a result, that person that was hit by your friend/partner could sue you as well. And they could sue you for the total amount left over after the insurance coverage. If your partner didn't have insurance coverage, then, the situation would be worse. So anytime you get into business and you have another party or you're trying to deal with other parties, it is very important to have an entity because you want to set forth guidelines, limitations. You want to limit liability. And let me say one other thing, too, is that if you're going to have other parties involved, there are always partner disputes. There have to be terms to how you're going to structure the agreement, how you're going to split profits. What's going to happen if somebody doesn't want to take part in the business anymore? Are they going to be able to just sell their rights to anybody that walks down the street? All these issues we'll get into, but there are a lot of reasons just from, I'll call them the legal sphere, to set something up and understand how it all works. And that way, when you grow and things continue, you can keep going forward without having any trouble. Or if there is trouble, you limit your exposure. Very, very important. Now, let me say one other thing, because the other thing is, well, people say, the chance of all that happening, I don't know. Well, let me tell you one thing. You are going to pay taxes every year, without a doubt. Unless you really want to go to jail or debtor's prison, you're going to pay taxes every year. And if you're properly structured, you can save a good deal in taxes. And that's because of something called self-employment taxes. And we'll get into all that. But for the business that's making, let's say, $25,000 to $35,000 a year, there can be tax savings that amount to thousands of dollars. So what would you do with an extra $2,000 in your business that you save in taxes? Well, you could take that money and invest in a whole myriad of web enhancement activities. So there are monetary issues from the standpoint of immediate tax dollars. There's also liability issues.
That's it, Sterling. You're not allowed to drive anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want you going out and hitting anybody and putting us at risk. So what I'm hearing here is
we got an LLC. So.
Yeah, no, good thing. So there's all these points of weakness, it sounds like, and the whole point is to protect your own personal car, your own personal bank account, your own personal house against these potential risks that your business faces. So I guess the question that comes to my mind now is how early in the process do you need to protect yourself? Like as soon as you decide you want to start a business, should you start this, or is it okay to wait and see if your business is going to make money before you start your LLC? What would you suggest to a business person in that case?